So I'd like to invite you all to another episode of In Conservation With. I'm really enjoying doing these because I get to meet such a wide range of different people, different personalities, different things that they do, different aspects of work within the conservation world. And one such fella, Amir Balaban, who's with us tonight from Israel, is a guy that I met a while ago, and we'll talk about how we know each other, but he does some amazing work in Israel. But before we actually start tonight's proceedings, just to let you know that we are sponsored, and the sponsors are Leica Sport Optics and King's Place Music Foundation, and they're sponsoring us for 1 year until the end of December this month as part of their Nature Unwrapped season. So thank you guys very much for supporting us. So without further ado, Amir Balaban, good evening, because you're a couple of hours ahead of me and I'm in Spain.
Yeah, it's already 9 o'clock in Jerusalem.
9 o'clock, wow. I'm in Spain, and by the way, just to warn everyone, it's a bank holiday. It's the last day of bank holiday today, and there's people playing loud music, so you may get a bit of flamenco getting into the microphone. So forgive me or enjoy it, either of the two. So just to give you a brief background on Amir, he is the co-founder and director of the Jerusalem Bird Observatory, the JBO, and the Jerusalem Gazelle Valley Park, which is Israel's first community urban wildlife site. So he's a man after my own heart. And I actually met you, Amir, it must have been about 7 years ago. And I remember I went to the Hula Valley Bird Festival, and I gave a talk one evening, and there was a bunch of people who came up from Jerusalem on the coach, and they turned out to be most of them were my fans, and they said after the talk, come back to Jerusalem with us. And I couldn't resist, so I got on the coach, and it was really quite exciting because I was meant to be in the Hula Valley. I got on the coach and came to Jerusalem with them, and the following day I think I met you, Amir, at the Jerusalem Bird Observatory.
Yeah, that sounds typical to our team of volunteers. They will kidnap you, and they're very proud of the JBO. One thing I have to correct, I'm not the director of the JBO anymore, and neither of Gazelle Valley Park. Thankfully, there are new directors that have taken over and are doing an amazing job. So now I'm actually the head of the Urban Wildlife Initiative, trying to develop more sites such as the JBO and Gazelle Valley Park. So the idea is now to multiply and create a different atmosphere in developing cities in Israel and hopefully all over the world.
Well, that's a great thing. And the Jerusalem Bird Observatory is an amazing place, which I'm sure Amir will tell us about shortly. The JBO focuses on research, education, and urban wildlife management programs. And the Gazelle Valley Park is a large-scale community-based wildlife conservation project situated in the center of the capital. Now, are you the founder and project director of the Urban Wildlife Initiative?
Correct.
Good. You're working under the auspices of the Society of the Protection of Nature in Israel, which is the BirdLife International partner, I believe?
Yes, it is.
And the initiative includes creating a national urban biodiversity database, running ecological surveys on a national scale, and developing urban wildlife master plans, and operating 2 community urban wildlife sites. And you currently teach a course in sustainable urban design at the Bezalel Art Academy in Jerusalem. So that's one side of you I didn't actually realize when I met you. I didn't realize that you were so into art and involved in art. But before I ask you that question, let's just go back even further and let's find out, how did you actually get into nature, into the whole conservation thing? What was your spark moment, as my American friends would say?
My spark moment was kestrels calling from a 12th floor toilet window in my neighborhood in North Jerusalem as I walked to school every morning. And that was the best part of my day, because from then on, everything went downhill in school. So for me, hearing the male calling and bringing in prey, and that really got me into watching birds and getting excited from observing nature, which is something that takes much of my my daily routine.
Okay, cool. So tell me more about the art side of it. How did that develop?
Well, every young naturalist reacts to nature in different ways. And the way I reacted was, like many young birders, I had my notebooks, and they included lists, verbal descriptions, and very quickly I started sketching little sketches of the birds I saw, because it helped me remember the features of birds, the jizz, the individual differences between specimens, and more and more I found myself spending time sketching birds, taking a photograph of birds, and gathering this bank of images that I still have today behind me. You can see my black notebooks here. These are all my sketches and ideas and texts that I write when I'm in the field and when I come back home. And they help me think of how to develop nature conservation in urban areas, or just, irregular experiences in text or images. And this is what basically got me into painting and sketching and filming.
Okay. Is conservation, the idea of conservation, is that a big thing in Israel amongst the people that, outside of the conservation world?
It is an issue. I don't think it's a big issue, because all over the world conservation is secondary to a lot of other things, and people tend to take nature for granted everywhere, and Israel is not different. Is no different. I think what's unique about Israel, that first of all, because it's a young country, most of the land is government owned, so you can influence nature conservation by working with or against government, and by that making sure that we have a big network of nature reserves that are well protected. The problem we have in Israel, that areas that are not nature reserves are under threat. They can be agricultural areas, forests, they can be urban areas, industrial zones, or firing zones, army firing zones. There we have to do a lot of work with stakeholders. And the organization I work for, the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, SPNI, specializes in this technique of working with stakeholders. Because, we believe that nature is basic, nature is a necessity, nature sustains us. You have to convince, you have to work with people and convince them in many ways. You have to do it with media, you have to do it with education, you have to do it with data. And these are things that everyone who's involved in conservation has to understand, that in a developing world, we have to have good data, we have to have good human relations. We can be aggressive and say, you're wrecking the world, you're doing a lot of bad things. But at the end of the day, there's no conservation without cooperation. We have to reach that understanding. So I think art is a very important mean to get that understanding, to get that first attention. Wow, where did you film that? Was this filmed in this specific area? Oh, what are the threats? How do we make sure we can utilize it maybe economically? and you've seen at the Hula Grain Festival how grains become an economical asset to a whole region that benefits thousands of people. And this is one of the techniques we are trying to improve all the time.
Cool. I mean, art is such an important element of what we do and our world in terms of the conservation world. And I think from my experience that people sometimes separate the two, or think that, you know, nature is one thing, culture, music, art is something else. And what they don't realize is all intertwined. And hopefully after your presentation, we'll understand that more. And we've had a few people actually on over the last months and weeks from the art world. So it's been really interesting to see the different types of art that's used to convey the message of conservation and to convey the message of love eventually. You know, that's the bottom line, really. We're trying to get people to love what's around them and care for it. So it'd be really interesting to see what you have to say. Before we start your talk, I just want to say that, you know, I've had some amazing experiences in Israel in terms of, you know, watching nature. I mean, going to Israel during the sort of spring passage is, I mean, it's hard to beat that, especially within Europe and areas near to Europe. It's hard to beat that. I mean, it's just incredible going to these wadis and finding bushes alive with birds, and going to small areas of water, reservoirs, or even, you know, when you're down in Eilat, you look at the Dead Sea, there's just so many, sorry, the Red Sea, there's so many birds to be seen and actively in migration. But it's not just birds, is it? It's obviously mammals as well, and other creatures.
Yeah, I think any place that is a connection between continents like Israel, between Africa, Asia, and Europe, is bound to be very rich. And the main problem we have is that Israel is very, very small, and every 20-minute drive you change a whole habitat, and you can cross the country in an hour and go from north to south in 3.5 hours, from Mediterranean wetlands to tropical Red Sea desert habitats. That's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because you have very little of each. That means once you wreck something, it's irreversible.
Yeah. Well, let's see what you have to say, Amir, if that's possible. Now, for those watching, remember that if you want to see Amir's presentation very clearly, go to Speaker View, so you have the whole screen as opposed to seeing a tiny dot in the corner. So I'll hand it over to Amir.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you how art and what I call basically conservation media is one of my most important tools in my toolbox. And this picture that I took on one of my daily trips in the urban wildlife habitats in Jerusalem became a kind of an iconic picture that basically is now used to explain how unsustainable development techniques create havoc in wildlife and wildlife habitats all over Israel. And a lot of people thought this was a kind of computer-generated image, but it's not. It's basically a male mountain gazelle, which is one of Israel's largest remaining mammals, overlooking an adjacent male. But from my point of view, as a photographer, as a conservationist, what I saw was this superposition of us, our development, and the Mediterranean habitats around Jerusalem. And this is a big, big problem for big mammals in Israel. Without continuous habitats, segregation of different areas is has very severe effect on the mammal population. Okay, and this is where it started. These are my my kiddie notebooks. This is how I started recollecting everything I saw and learned, and you can see how, you know, when we talk about notebooks today, it sounds ridiculous to open a notebook and write with a pencil, you know, when everything's so digital. But you can see all the first species I met either in Israel or when I traveled abroad. I lived 2 years in the States, a few years in England as a kid. And all these experiences were translated into images. And now, to this day, this is how I collect my images in notebooks. And when I graduated my bachelor's degree in arts in Bezalel as a photographer, I set out for my South American trip, and I took a camera and I took my sketching kit, and I found myself more and more attracted to sketching birds in the wild. And you can see this double spread of Andean condor and the Australian woodpecker and the different woodland species just jumping around in the book, and this really made me feel very happy and very content to watch and describe them with color and pencil. And when I came back to Israel, this was 1993, I was really horrified from the idea of going, you know, getting a regular job. So what I did basically is, I think what attracted me was the voyage through places, and I decided to go up to the Golan Heights, which is one of the more wilder areas in northern Israel, and I made this voyage, a 6-month voyage from Mount Hermon, the snows of Mount Hermon, down to the nearly tropical Jordan Valley habitat. And as a bird ringer, some of the descriptions were birds in the hand, such as you see this house martin is basically in my hand. Others were much more free. These are the cranes in the Golan Heights, early morning. This is a volcanic steppe, a lot of grassland, a lot of beautiful steppe species. And once you start getting hooked on voyages or trips or expeditions, expeditions are an excuse to set yourself on a voyage. You have your time limit, and you don't do anything else but focus on this. So my next project was the Jordan River, and I made this project depicting the wildlife of the Jordan River. This is a jungle cat, an Asian cat, relatively big. It's the size of a little bit smaller than a bobcat, but it's a tropical cat, fond of water, which is, you know, crazy for cats. Most cats despise water, and this was a jungle cat I sketched live when it was sleeping on a tree. It probably climbed on a tree, and it didn't want to go down and just fell asleep on a tree. And on the left, you can see a female with one of her kittens playing in the grass. So voyages and expeditions are a very important part of what I do, and I set time to leave home. And when I leave home, I usually pack all my equipment. I have a little van, and I move into the van. And this is a Negev expedition I did in 2002. This is a good friend of mine, Jean Chevalier. He lives in France, just across the channel if you're from England. Also an excellent wildlife artist. And this is he joined me for this for a few days on the trip. And this is what we encountered. This is the Hubar bustard, an endangered species in Israel. The only bustard in the Negev. And this was a bustard that was I sketched early morning with an easterly wind, and you can see how the wind actually, you know, frills its neck feathers. And this is on another morning, on a misty, cold morning, backlit male dancing its funny dance, waving his neck feathers. And this is what's nice about or attractive about sketching birds and wildlife in the field, is that it brings the moment. It's not a photograph. It's not about you know details. It's about the emotion that you feel when you see something which is really unique. So this is the desert, and if you get to desert habitats, they become really attractive, and everything, all the details are very, I would say slender. Everything is delicate. On one hand, on the other hand, deserts can be very violent. The temperature, flash floods, etc. And once you go to deserts and you get to the Arctic, you start understanding that the extremities of Earth are very unique. Another thing you learn is when you deal with art, it affects people. And when we were working by the Egyptian border, Border Patrol came to check out what are these crazy people doing. And when they see how this is done and what are we actually looking at, and these people actually work and live there for many months every year, they're not aware of this beauty. And this art form is a way to introduce and expose this beauty. This was a striped hyena we observed way back here, nearly 800 meters away. So the sketches can't be detailed, but this was a sleeping hyena in a little den. Then it woke up and it stretched, and then the wind came and spilled some sand on the sketch, and there you have it. You know, it's something that you can't even recreate. Another species of very unique bird, the hoopoe lark, one of the prettiest larks in the Israeli desert, with its very mellow and sad song that, nearly, you hear nothing and then you hear the song of the hoopoe lark. It's a really emotional moment. This is from another project I did in the Hula Valley, and this is how I work. I sit, this is my studio. And sometimes what I'm looking for is not only the bird, but also how it relates to the habitat, to water. I was more interested in the pelicans in the reflection than preening in the water when they're on their way down to Africa and they stop over in the Hula Valley. So as an expedition junkie, this is another expedition I did, and sometimes I just choose a goal. One of my goals was I really wanted to see the largest owl on Earth, the blackest fish owl. And I got a car from a friend. I put a mattress inside, and I drove from Tokyo to Hokkaido, and of course met all the different species the way, and of course reacted. This is autumn in Hokkaido. Everything is, orange, browns, really mellow colors, and these cranes are amazing. They're huge, really exciting. And to make a very long story short, and an exciting one too, I reached this little farmhouse in Haotsu in northern Hokkaido with two old ladies that run a little michku, which is sort of a bed and breakfast, and asked them, "Is this where you see the owls?" They said, "Wait, Japanese, they have it. Wait, first you eat, and then, ooh." And this is exactly what happened. We ate, and one of the things, David just mentioned, it's a holistic approach. It's the people, it's the landscape, it's the smell, it's the food, it's hospitality, it's the enjoyment of nature, and then it happens. Then the magic comes. The beautiful blackest fish owl comes. This is the dessert. And it's an amazing owl, the biggest owl in the world. A male and a female came in. The male fed the female, and I was clicking away and enjoying myself. And it's amazing. And again, as I said, extremities always attract me. And from time to time, I guide groups all over the world. It could be expeditions to the Arctic or the Antarctic. And these extremities are amazing. They're also very evocative when you are an onlooker and you are an observer. The landscapes, of course, are amazing, but the creatures are phenomenal. This is a southern royal albatross, and sometimes a magical moment happens where you see a convergence of magic. An albatross and a blow of a whale together. And that moment, this is a still photograph, but it's a moment that epitomizes the Southern Oceans, the force and the magnitude of what's happening under the water, over the water. Everything is connected. Both are coming to feed on similar things. They move together without us even understanding this. So it's always interesting to look at nature in different ways, and you know, looking at things that, you know, penguins can't fly. That's what's in all the books. But when you go down low enough, penguins fly. They porpoise actually, and they have this beautiful water cape. And to see all these different creatures in their element, this is another day in the office for this cape. You know, for us, it's unbearable weather, but for them, it's nothing. And this is the day we landed on a Brown Bluff. It's a bay in the Antarctic Peninsula. And suddenly a katabatic wind started and a snowstorm, which is quite rare in the peninsula actually, started blowing. And what interested me is how all these creatures that are adapted to these conditions react. This is an Adelie penguin bending towards the wind. And everything, this is a color photograph, it's not black and white. Everything darkens immediately and everything is covered with snow, and it's so dramatic. And this is a picture that someone took of me when everybody was escaping the bay and I didn't want to leave. And I said, I have to stay, but you know, you can't. And this is how we survive. We can survive a few more minutes in these conditions, but this is how we have to dress, which is crazy. And same again, this is another expedition in the Arctic. These are images that are so unique and so rare that they really are a trigger for photography and perspective. And if you are trained as an artist, many times you are looking for that moment that will drive you to create an image. It can be a sketch, it can be a video, or a still photograph. And this is a unique experience I had in Africa. I'm an African addict. I was staying in a small lodge by the Nile, and someone called me, come look, because there's a group of baboons. And that was me taken, that picture was taken by my wife, taking a picture of this baboon. And she was laughing all the time because he said, you look so much alike. Both of you are naked, looking at each other. And this little baboon was looking at me, and I was taking pictures of, and we're so similar. And when you get to Africa and you meet these primates, and they make you understand that we are a part of the whole system. We are not different. Maybe we're highly developed, but we are a part of the system, and we must understand it. This is critical. Curiosity is a very important part of creating art, and today we are exposed to a lot of images that are digital images that we receive via our computer and internet. And I was asked by a colleague of mine to consider making a survey, an ecological survey in Angola. And I was a bit hesitant because Angola was just after a very long civil war, and you know, it's not a very safe place, especially for Israelis at that time, because it was a communist country. And then I said, listen, I'll think about it and I'll tell you. And I went to Google Earth, and suddenly I saw this image of the Namib Desert, and I was really dazzled by these dunes. I said to myself, what's happening? Is this an aberration of an image? Something happened here? What are these pink dunes? And I called back to my friend and said, listen, yes, I'll do the job, but I want to do the Namib Desert area on a few conditions. He said, what are your conditions? I said, I need a satellite phone just in case. And I'm going to need four-wheel drive, and also a Zodiac, because there's an interesting island there. This is not a problem. And that got me suspicious. You know, when you ask someone for all these things, then go ahead, sounds fishy. So we set off, and you can see the team that was organized for the survey. And of course, we drove down the Tiger Coast. It's called the Tiger Coast because apparently you can see here that the dunes have these stripes. So anybody traveling from along the Atlantic coast, when they see this amazing sand dune coast, it looks like a tiger. So they call it the Tiger Coast, and it's a 300, 200, 300-meter sand dune that drops immediately into the sea. And it's a very dangerous drive because when the tide is high, it will sweep everything down. So you have to time your drive very, very, very on specific timetables in order to drive safely. And apparently, what I saw on Google Earth was true. The sand is pink. And apparently the Benguela current collects pink sand from inner Africa, and it spreads it with the current and the wind on the sand dune. And it's an amazing effect, which was, you know, for me, pink sand dunes are, you know, amazing. All the different reptiles and birds and mammals running over them. And this is how we camped out. And this is how we traveled to survey the different mammals and bird life on the islands there. And it was an amazing experience. One of the most funny things that happened to us, we encountered a flock of pelicans that were fishing, and the fish there are abundant. And these pelicans just flew away, and in order to lift off easily, they threw up the fish they just fished in this beautiful bay. And these fish were laying all around, and it was a real shame because the pelicans flew away and it looked like such a waste. So the team immediately gathered the few fish and they prepared them for supper. And it was the first time I actually ate something that a pelican threw up, which is, you know, when you think of it, sounds ridiculous, but the fish became good. The other thing that happened, that the only drinkable substance these guys brought was beer. So this was the first survey ever that I had beer from morning to dusk. So I would say that the data I collected in this specific survey, you know, was under the influence. And of course, when you don't plan correctly, you get stuck in the sea. And we were luckily helped by another team that came in front of us. And we managed to leave this area safely without being swept into the Atlantic. And another expedition I took part in 2017 to Kamchatka to look for the spoonbill sandpiper in an endangered species of shorebird. The sandpiper has something like around 100 pairs remaining. A lot of efforts are put in the conservation efforts. One of them is bringing tourists that sustain the conservation efforts. So of course, we met all the different wildlife, such as this beautiful Stella seagull. And also, we met people that live in extremities. And this is daddy's car, and this is mommy's car. Amazing. This is how people move around. This is how they go to the shops. The conditions in Kamchatka are really, really extreme. We're talking about, you know, tough tundra. And of course, the experience of looking and searching for the spoonbills is amazing. And there they are. This one is actually a tagged bird. You can see over here a tag and the special spoon-like bill. And of course, a sketch that is done very, very quickly on the move in the tundra with a beautiful male. And another interesting trip I had a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, in Ecuador, and there I wanted to meet one of the penguins that I really was curious to meet. This is the Galapagos penguin, an endangered species, very few of them left. And I wanted to photograph this unique bird. And as I saw my first Galapagos penguin, I was taking pictures of it, and suddenly, to my astonishment, I see in the background a Galapagos sea lion swimming behind the penguin. And I said to myself, oh my God, the first Galapagos penguin I've ever seen is going to be eaten by a sea lion. And I said to myself, this is horrifying. So he jumped up at the penguin, and this is what the penguin did. He bit the sea lion in the nose, on the nose. The sea lion gave a cry and shoved off, and he was laughing his head off. And I was so surprised to see, something. When you watch wildlife, you start predicting what might happen. What am I going to see? Especially if you're doing a lot of video, you want to capture the moment. So this is another thing that I love watching nature and observing, is the surprises, constantly surprised. And one of the last images from the Galapagos, and you know that the Galapagos has a very important role in our perception of nature and evolution. And these are the Galapagos finches, the Darwin bases evolution theory. And look at them. They're eating empanadas. So as an urban wildlife person, for me, this is evolution in front of your face. Seeing Galapagos, Darwinian Galapagos finches eating off a plate in a coffee shop in the airport, which is crazy. And it shows how the rapid development of our environment is so challenging on one hand, but on the other hand, it's very, very exciting. The other thing I love to do is to do a return expedition. And this is a Negev expedition I did 2019 to see how things changed. This time I solarized off grid, which is nice. In 2000 and whatever, 9, I think, no solar power. So suddenly I can work at night, have a computer. And of course, this time, no French person came with me. This is my Belgian friend. The situation is different. It started off close to the Gaza border, and the sky is much more intensive nowadays, with balloons and drones and aeroplanes, what have you. And this is a greatest spotted eagle, one of the endangered species that overwinters in Israel, and mountain gazelles. And of course, one of the most exciting areas is the sand dunes of Agur, where I traveled. This is what we call the Israeli Sahara. Quite a challenging place to travel in, but for reptiles, you can see it's quite an easy. This is a 4-wheel drive desert tortoise, an endemic species to our area. And of course, you can also, in springtime, you get these amazing views of green pastures, water in the desert, and of course, a lot of local species that are preparing for spring, or Siberian species in the desert preparing for their flight back home to Northern Europe. And of course, this is the desert wheat here by the Egyptian border. And now, how do I, use this to create places that ensure that nature sustains a rapid rate of development? This building in the background is the Israeli Knesset. It's our parliament. And this is Capitol Hill. 26 years ago, with a group of friends, we decided that this patch of land down here, can you see my arrow? This was our old birding haunt. And we decided that 26 years ago, after we caught a bird with a ring from Stockholm, from Sweden, that we must preserve this place. So it was a long story how we managed to protect this site from becoming a parking lot, but what we managed to create here is an urban observatory with a ringing station, a bird hide, and a visitor center, and also a little pond. And this is how it started. It was an old gardener's shed, and we started bringing in groups. And what we found out that it's easy to convince decision makers that it's important for educational reasons and community reasons than for unique birds. So this is our ringing operation after we renovated the little hut, and this is the ringing program. It's an open educational ringing program, and this is how it looks today. And look at our clients. These are ultra-religious kids that never learn biology or hardly learn biology, and the accessibility of the JBO enable us to work with all kinds of people. Religious people, Muslims, Christians, tourists, whoever comes to Capitol Hill can pass through the JBO and get some real conservation experience. This is our bird hide. This is the most urban bird hide in Israel, the first urban bird hide. And you can see it's designed for up to 30 people, so you can have a full class watching this little habitat, which is artificial but looks natural, okay? All native plants. You can imagine what happens in migration when there's a fall of migrants. It's clicking away. It's really jumping with birds. And we also have a gallery, Israel's first wildlife art gallery. And you can see that we use everything. We use science, we use education, and we use art. So this is one of the exhibitions in the gallery. And hands-on, we introduce art as a tool to observe and enjoy nature. So we hold a lot of workshops for kids and adults who come and sketch and react. This is the European nightmare you saw up here. And this is how a young person with great ease depicts this image. And you know, kids come, a lot of it is subsidized. We raise money specifically for these projects. And she's pretty tough. It looks like a swift actually, but apparently nigers and swift are very, very close relatives. Okay, so the other project that is on a larger scale is the Gazelle Valley Park. You can see this park with a beautiful, huge pond in the bottom here. This is our entrance building, and people can come here and enjoy wildlife big time. And this is what they see. This is a female mountain gazelle with a fawn coming to suckle in the park, and this can be observed from the paths and hides. And we actually have ferruginous ducks nesting in the park. They came by themselves, and it's, you know, it was a big hit because it is an endangered species. Coming into town, breeding. These are the first documentation of 3 chicks, and of course, people come to sketch, paint, and this was the fantasy, to create a hide that people can take photographs, eye level of ducks. So this was the design, and this was the result. So we create the infrastructure for people to watch and react. And sometimes these hides are fully packed. You just can't, you know, there's no room for photographers or birders or anything. So this is basically what we're aiming at. This was taken this summer. A grandfather and his grandchild. You see the religious also. You see the peot. The kid has these long called peot. That means it's a religious kid, and they come to photograph together. So from our point of view, it's not enough to have an endangered species nesting in Gazelle Valley Park. If we have someone coming to take photographs and enjoy it, it's even better. So the idea is to create this infrastructure, not only in Jerusalem. By the way, many cities all over the world are moving in this direction with urban wildlife sites, making wildlife approachable, accessible. And David also is a true partner in this ideology. He's a true urbanite, and bringing urban people to enjoy birds, wildlife in the city.
Well, excuse my headphone here. I think I need this is a hint for a Christmas present, guys. Hint, hint. Absolutely fabulous. I mean, it's amazing, to see your travels around the world and to admire the photographs, but also the art. I mean, some of the stuff that you showed us is great. And there is a question actually from Joe Seal, who was asking, I think you're asking Joe Seal, actually, would you like to come on for a quick second, Joe Seal?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you.
I was wondering what kind of equipment or what kind of art tools you bring for watercolor painting when you're moving around so much, for watercolor painting on the fly.
This is my kit. It's a small bag, and I have this set of brushes and pencils, and I also have these watercolors, basic kit, and that's it. And you mustn't forget water and a cup, and that's it.
Okay, nothing fancy.
No. And I usually this is a notebook. This is the type of notebook I use for quick sketches, and I also have a packet of nice thick watercolor paper. Usually Arches 300 grams, which are nice and thick, and they absorb water if I really want to splurge, like have fun. That's it.
Nice. Thank you.
Chris was also asking, no beer. I think you are the first person on the whole of this series to feature a naked picture of themselves. I can see this catching on. I know that in Sweden, there's a group that when they see a new species, they all take their clothes off and have to see it naked.
It's so Swedish, yes.
Maya, you got a couple of questions.
Yes, I do. Hello, Amir. Thank you for that. That was a really interesting talk. I had a couple of questions. The first one being, what sort of opportunities are there for sort of young conservationists and ornithologists out in Israel?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, as one of the founders of the JBO and Gazelle Valley Park, and also an active educator, we're always looking for young people that will take over when we're out of the business. We can't afford not to have young people involved in a very, very active way. So when you work in the city, in the inner city, you get to see a lot of people, and every boy or girl that are interested in nature will end up on our doorstep. And our job is to identify them. Once we identify these kids, we start, first of all, their parents are usually frustrated because they ask too many questions they have no answers for. So we're the address for this. And we start taking care of it. That means we're inviting them to our bird ringing sessions, and they join our bird club, and they start taking part in our field trips, and they join the champions of the flyways, and they become good field people. And we teach them how to guide. And then every boy or girl find their fortes, their talents, and this is how they develop. So we have kids that are amazing artists. They're amazing. They can be amazing guides. They can be excellent surveyors. And once they reach their teens, they become active members and productive members. This is one of the most amazing things. I always like when people ask me, anybody who can speak about this and that, and say, yeah, we've got this kid you should talk to, or this girl, she's amazing, and they do a better job than us. Then we usually all have this kind of a pause because most of our kids have to go to the army. The army is obligatory in Israel, so we have a 2-year pause, 2.5-year pause. But then when they finish, they are onto it. A lot of them will carry on guiding, going into their studies. They will go to do a bachelor's degree in arts or in the sciences, and they will be involved in our work. And everyone finds their way either in media, research, active conservation, management, land management. It really depends. So I think nowadays there are more opportunities for young people than there were, I would say, 15, 20 years ago.
That's really interesting, thank you. And another question I had was, have you been involved in any exciting bird ringing studies or projects?
The JBO is an interesting site because we've been ringing regularly for 26 years. And when I say regularly, it's the same amount of nets, same effort all year round. So I think the most exciting thing is see this huge database that reflects on how birds survive in the city. And what we see is quite dramatic. We see, first of all, that numbers of birds are dropping in general. There are less birds, less habitats, less birds. The second thing is that we see species that were once abundant and now are diminishing. Turtle doves, for example. They were a common breeding bird in Jerusalem. Nowadays, they're very, very rare breeders, if at all. And once they were prolific migrants, now they're regular migrants, and the numbers are really on the down. Quail, okay? These are species that once were very abundant in our region. Now they're becoming scarcer or rarer. So the data, I think, is very, very important. Not only that, because the site is operation is done in such a way that we can see the relationship between birds and plants. That's another aspect which is very important. We can devise a list of trees and shrubs that are extremely important for European migrants when they pass through Jerusalem. So when we work with the municipality, which is a stakeholder in the design of new parks and gardens, we can affect what kind of plants are planted. So migrants can carry on using the city as a stopover site, because the more people live in Jerusalem, the more it's developed, the less habitat it has to sustain these migrants. So this is another example how a ringing station creates a database that influences policy, management, and this is very crucial for bird conservation.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the JBO is an incredible place. Having visited it myself and seen, in fact, sat with all those kids myself and was as excited as those kids myself when birds were being pulled out of the nets. I remember that particular year there was an abundance of, because it's during the winter, so there was a hawfinch winter, because hawfinches are like waxwings up in northern, well, certainly in Britain, in that they turn up in varying numbers over the winter. And there was a whole load of them, if you remember, Amir.
Yeah.
And I remember they also pulled out a robin from the nets. And you always think, well, maybe not people in the know. I mean, people in the know would know this, but people, the general public, think that a robin lives for years and years and years and years. And I've upset many kids saying to them, well, actually, a robin only lasts for about a year, you know, and they run off to their mums crying. But I remember there was a robin extracted from the net and it was 7 years old and its ring number was 007. I remember that. That's incredible. And plus you've had some really good rare birds there as well, like eye-browed thrush. I mean, this whole site is less than an acre, isn't it? It's tiny.
An acre and a half. It's really, really small. But it's like an oasis in the desert, but it's an unurban desert. So that's the same effect.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple more questions, but what we're going to do is take them during the party zone, the Q&A at the end. So I've got a couple of questions for you, Amir. The first of which is, what is your favorite mammal?
The striped hyena. Absolutely, this is the mammal that I've been spending most time with during the last years. I've been filming striped hyenas about 20 minutes outside Jerusalem in a Mediterranean scrub area, and I'm amazed at this. This is our largest predator. Sadly, the last Arabian leopard was spotted in 2008, so this is our largest predator. And it's really an amazing and elusive mammal that not a lot of people know much about. And I've managed to document a lot of really, really cool stuff. And you can watch some of the footage on my YouTube channel. Later on, we'll put the link to my channel, Israel Wildlife Channel. And I'm planning to make a film about them. So I think, yeah, definitely striped hyena.
Well, looking forward to that film when you make it. And what's your favorite bird?
That's easy. That's my starter bird. That's the kestrel. And I love kestrels. They are so, adaptive, and they're so feisty, and they're vocal, and they are survivors, and they're easy to watch. So I always enjoy watching kestrels flying against the wind,
Yes, superb. And the final question in this part of this evening's proceedings. Notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be if you could be anywhere in the world right now?
That's a cruel question. I was supposed to be in Greenland this year, and just anywhere, just let me out. That's what I want. I think if I had an immediate choice. I think I would go celebrate somewhere tropical. I would say maybe Peru, or Colombia. How's Colombia for you?
Yeah, two good choices there. All right, Zoomers, just to let you know that tomorrow we've got Pascalis Dugalis, who is another artist, amazing artist who lives in Germany, and he'll hopefully be painting live for us tomorrow and talking and taking questions about his art. On Thursday, the 10th of December, we have Heather Wolf, who is an American urban birder, and she'll be talking about birding in Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York. And then next week on Monday, the 14th, we have Joel Ashton, one half of the famous Butterfly Brothers, urban wildlife gardener, and he'll be here to talk about aspects of urban wildlife gardening. On the 17th, that's Thursday next week, we've got Melissa Grew, she describes herself as not as a photographer, even though she's an amazing photographer. She's a biographer, a natural biographer. So she'll be talking about her work, and she's amazing. And there's other people that we will have put on the site shortly, including Alison Steadman, who's coming up on the 22nd or 21st, I think, of December. And Mayor Alison Steadman's a national treasure in the UK. She's an actress, but also very much into birding. So listen, thank you very much, Amir, for a very entertaining and interesting hour, learning about not only your work and your art, but also the situation in Israel when it comes to connecting people in urban areas with nature, a thing after my own heart. So thank you very much, Amir. Excuse me. And Zoomers, thank you very much. And as I always say, keep looking up.